All right, senior home business family, how you guys doing today? It's a Wednesday. I almost said Monday, Brittany. This week is flown by. It seems like a Monday to me. July 31st, 2024. We're here talking about usually senior placement. And you'll see the Senior Placement Institute up in the top right-hand corner. If you know more about this business, working from home, helping seniors, this is the place to come and go. But we're going to talk about memory care today. We're going to talk about that's one of the areas, one of the levels of care that we help and assist with seniors. It's not only independent living, it's not only assisted living. You hear a lot about assisted living, and you probably hear a lot about me. I think, Brittany, I mentioned the words assisted living probably more than anything when it comes to this industry. So that could be like 90% of my marketing. I don't know why, but it just is. But there is an area of residents that are in need of memory care. They're in cognitive decline. So we're going to talk about that today. We're going to pull up an article in just a minute. But we're going to get into a little bit the sales cycle. So we're going to hit this. This video is targeting senior placement agents that are out there to understand that there's a difference in the sales cycle with memory care versus AL and independent living. And this also could be helpful for communities, memory care communities, because we're going to get into the different approaches that's optimal when you're talking to families. There's just a different way of going about doing it. And we'll get into that. We're also going to get in some ways to how to generate leads. So if you see the thumbnail or the title, how to get leads fast, we're going to talk about this. Now, fast is relative. I know you can get a lead tomorrow, you can get a lead next month, but you know, you can get a lead fast if you do some of the things we're going to tell you to do later on in this video. So Brittany, let's get into it. The memory care sales cycle. What makes it a little bit different than working with an AL or independent level community?
A lot of times you'll find that families are in crisis mode when it comes to looking for memory care placement. I would say this is probably and I think you can relate, the hardest placement emotionally, just the whole sales. I hate the word sales cycle. We say we're not salesy, so I don't like,
right.
like that saying. But as far as placement into memory care, they're a different beast. This is a totally different, usually kind of situation. A lot of times they're very urgent. And a lot of times families, there's a lot of, I guess, emotions that go behind every placement, but I think in particular, memory care is tough. A lot of times seniors that need memory care might be amazing physically. They can walk, they can feed themselves. They don't need help with bathing. They don't need help with dressing. Maybe they do, but a lot of times for the family, it's really hard to accept where their loved ones are when it comes to memory care. Because for anybody, we could probably all relate if we saw our loved one still doing all these things. Sometimes, Matt, you've probably heard this too, driving even. I've had clients that are still driving a day before we place them in memory care. So that's alarming, but it's the reality of the situation. It's hard when you're in the situation with your family has dementia or Alzheimer's to wrap your brain around the fact that they can do all these things physically, but mentally, unfortunately, they do need 24 oversight, whether that be again, helping with actual physical things or just simply having them in a secure environment where they aren't unsafe to themselves. So I would say in my experience doing placement, these are the hardest, but can be the most rewarding placements that you do. But it's a totally different feeling as far as it usually don't have weeks. Sometimes you don't even have weeks. Sometimes you don't have months. It's very fast. These are fast moves.
Absolutely. And then that kind of brings to this point here that memory care is really in a crisis mode, isn't it? It's when you're dealing with memory care residents and their family, as opposed to AL and independent living. The AL and independent living is more proactive, right? I mean, I know that can be urgent as well. I've moved a lot of assisted living residents, overnight, literally the next day, and I've done some within a couple of weeks and a couple of days. But memory care is just a different level, and it typically puts the family in crisis mode. Is that true?
Yeah, I would say, and this is nothing negative on the families. Most memory care placements, they are not. I've heard things like, we knew this was coming. We knew she's slipping. We know that there's been some memory, decline, but almost always it's an event. And yes, assisted living, same way, like you mentioned, could be a fall, could be, they walk in and realize mom or dad really does need help. But when it comes to memory care, usually it cannot wait, because if they need memory care, they usually need support now, probably needed support months ago, but it comes to literally a crisis mode where I've had families say they can't even stay overnight. I've had ERs tell me that they wish they had somebody like me that I could staff the emergency room overnight 24/7, because people do bring their loved ones in crisis mode if it's sundowning, or if I've heard horrible, sad stories where they become combative, and it's not their fault. It's just what the disease does. And it's really tough. So, and the hospital and things, I'm hearing this a lot. They can't really admit them they can't keep them for too long just for dementia or Alzheimer's. There's really just a lot of factors that go into this. But yes, a lot of families don't plan ahead in general and for senior living, but when it comes to memory care, it heightens everything to a literal crisis mode.
Absolutely. This article, Brittany, gets into, what are the personas in memory care lead gen? And I want to get into this a little bit as well, because, when you're dealing with the adult kids, it's going to be more intellectual. And I just say that from experience. I'm an adult kid, right? My mom and dad are not in assisted living or memory care at this moment. Hopefully they never will be, but you never know. But I'm typically the age of adult kid, and I would take an intellectual approach. But speak to how the spouse may approach this whole thing, because it is about trust, right? It's all about trust when it comes to the spouse.
Yeah. I mean, they've made a commitment to their life. A lot of these seniors have been married. I've heard 60 years, 40 years, like they've done everything together. Some of them are high school sweethearts that they've known nothing but each other. So making this decision to put their loved one in a place, I hear that term a lot, put somebody in somewhere, put them in a home. We promise never to do this. We want to grow old together. It's really heartbreaking. So they go into it emotionally for sure. It's hard. This is so hard. I hope I never have to go through it myself, honestly, or with my family, because I can't imagine even putting myself in these situations. It's a huge decision, and they're going to go in with their emotions first before they start learning about pricing and like getting over the hump of even just the thought of placing their loved one, placing their husband, placing their wife, I think is the first. And I know this article talks about from a child's perspective. I can relate to that. I would say with my clients, I almost have the same thing though. I would say most of my clients still go, this is a very emotional situation. I think we're all going to have our own, feelings about it. But I would definitely say even children go in emotional first. When you get over that hump, then we start talking about, the logistics of it, talking about moving and pricing and what the long-term looks like. But this article specifically says that the spouse really goes in emotionally first to gain trust of the whole situation, then goes further into making that informed decision to place their loved one in a community, where the kids kind of go wanting to know all the education first, then emotions come in the latter. But I can't say I can relate totally with my clients, but.
Absolutely. I mean, you think of a spouse that has said in a vow for better or for worse. Mm-hmm. I mean, and they've taken that to heart, especially this generation.
Yeah.
I know today, and anybody in general, not to pinpoint one particular generation, but man, we're talking about seniors of this age, born the time they were born. Man, they really have taken that to heart. I would think the divorce rate is a lot lower with these, this age group versus today, and even my generation. Mm-hmm. So when they say for better, for worse, they mean that. And so when they're walking into a community, you're right, Brittany, they're not just primarily thinking about price, even though I know that's a factor. They're not just thinking about, what the place looks like, even though that's really important. They're really struggling with abandonment issues. Like, am I really putting my loved one, someone I've been married to for 50 years, in a home or in a community, and I'm not the one that's going to be taking care of this individual? And, it's what I do like about what this article said is I did point out, if we can get the spouse that's putting the trust first, if we can get them to the point of seeing this allows them to become a spouse again, where they could actually have a date night. They could actually come over and visit. And I know some communities don't allow you to stay overnight. Some do. The article said you can come stay the night. Some do. But, you could possibly do those things, and it will put the spouse in a role of the husband or the wife versus the caregiver. And that's got to be the hardest thing in the world, because you love your spouse and you want to take care of them. You want the care to be optimal. And you feel like there's no one in this world that can take care of your spouse better than you can. But you, out of love, you start doing that, but it starts to wear on you, I would think. Now, I've never experienced this in my life. My wife is fun, vibrant. You met her, Brittany, a few weeks ago. I mean, but I can't imagine being at that level and having to go to a memory care community and looking for a place for my loved one, for Josie. And it's more than just what the room looks like. Even though all that's important, it's just like they struggle with that. Like, okay, now we're not in the same room together. We're not in the same house together. We're not watching TV shows every night like we used to. We're not, and that's what they're struggling with. And so that's important for us to understand as senior placement agents. That is the level of conversation that you should be having with your families, and know the difference between when you're talking to the adult kids who are primarily looking at it from an intellectual approach versus the spouse. Because you start talking to the spouse, you might not want to lead with the intellectual stuff. Look at the brochure, look how sweet they are and all that. You might need to have a heart to heart with them first. So let's get into, Brittany, a little bit of what kind of messaging resonates with memory care communities and residents. So let's get into that. What kind of messaging resonates with them?
Yeah, we hit on it a little bit. Just be emotional, being empathetic, understanding where they're coming from. You definitely hit a lot of good things, like saying what the article says on how the spouse could be a spouse again. I use this term a lot, even if there's no spouse involved, but let's say it's children being children again, not being the caregivers, not trying to balance being a caregiver and a daughter, or a son. So I think just making sure you're getting to their level, be empathetic. Again, not push brochures in front of them and say, we're the best, we have the best this, because a lot of it, when it comes to memory care, none of those amenities matter. A pool doesn't matter, sometimes not even the activities matter to a degree. So there's just a lot more that they want to get down to the emotional. Like, I've been in good tours, been in, really not so great tours. And I would say overall, when I've been with a family and I've spoke with them in a community, it's just becoming real. Like, just getting down to earth, that we understand where you're coming from. We can't imagine that being in your shoes, but we're here to support you. So being emotional, being there for straight support, as opposed to trying to sell a place.
Absolutely. Because when you're in that discovery phase communities, and we've all been part of some, like you said, some good tours and some not so good tours, right? But the tours I've been involved with that are exceptional, they spend a lot of time in that discovery phase. Yep. They're not necessarily, I know deep down inside, it's all about, okay, get the resident in, it's a business, and that's that side of it. But these individuals that give really good tours and have a really good discovery phase, they have a one-on-one, heart-to-heart conversation with the family. They start to identify with the family, and they start to understand what they're going through. They're not pretending to be counselors and walk them through every step and way of life. But man, you got to be empathetic, and you've got to, and here's part of it, acknowledge how challenging the situation is. As a community and as a senior placement agent, we're in this and we see it from the standpoint of helping the individual, but the spouse and the family are looking at it, man, this is very challenging for us. It's what we should not do is treat every situation being the same, every family being the same, because they're not, you guys. Some are more emotional than others, but when you get to the spouse, you get to the family, it's acknowledging how challenging the situation is. And I like this one, Brittany. Speak on this one. I mean, recognizing and honoring what they've done for their loved one, right? Because I have heard many times, again, it's no fault to communities that are out there. They all do their best. And like I said, some are good and some are just in the process of getting good. But it's all about, hearing their story real quick and then saying, okay, well, here's a solution. And they kind of skip this step of recognizing and honoring what they've done for their loved one and celebrating that. Can you speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think it's missed a lot too. I think it's something that we're all looking for. The end game is, whether you're a community or a placement agent, the goal is to get them placed, but this is huge. Like, I know in this article, it even says they have missed work. I have so many clients that have taken FMLA, that they have taken weeks off of work, that they have had sleepless nights. I mean, they are putting so much into their loved ones. I think with memory care specifically, the memory care placement usually at the end of the rope. So they have tried everything. The family has tried everything. The spouse has tried everything. They've brought in caregivers. They've done everything they possibly can as a family. So recognize that. This is something that, I guess you could say we're not obligated to do. If you want to say that, to be honest, there's some families that do everything possible. And usually that is what you're going to have, as a family that's done literally everything they possibly can to keep their loved one at home. So give them credit. I always say we weren't born to know how to be a caregiver. A lot of us, especially family members, work nothing in caregiving, have no clue the first thing to do when it comes to caring for another human being, especially with someone with dementia or Alzheimer's. So give them credit. We weren't born to know how to do this. And a lot of them are in a crash course to learn how to take care of their loved ones. So make sure they feel that, because again, this is so hard emotionally that I really think they almost need that recognition to move forward. They really do. It's sad. It's even sad talking about it. Just so many people, like you said, of emotions. Like, you will have calls as a placement agent where they are crying and they're just tore up about the whole situation. So
Absolutely. And when you do celebrate what they have done, what I have recognized is you'll recognize a smile on their face. It might be a brief smile, but when you acknowledge somebody, that makes them feel good. You appreciate someone, it makes them feel good. So when you recognize and honor what they've done, for a moment, might be a split second, but they smile. And it puts them temporarily in a good state of mind, and it might make them more comfortable in moving forward. But if you don't do this recognizing, honoring step, man, I tell you, I can see families just backtracking, and just like, I'm not going to have my husband go there. No, I said I'm going to take care of him the rest of my life, and better or worse, and all that, and keep going on. So let's get into from the placement agency out there, because we got some students, Brittany, that are watching. We got people that are out there that want to do this business, maybe, or contemplating this business. And we're going to get into some empathetic marketing. This article goes through a number of different ones here. We're going to get through these right here. And, we always kind of, in the Senior Placement Institute, go over a little bit of the organic approach, right? And I like the organic approach, not meaning you can't do some of the things that we're going to, suggest you do. And the first one is going to cost a little bit, right? It could cost a little bit or a lot, depends on how much you throw in the pot and how much you expect to get back, and all that kind of stuff. But I like the organic approach because I always like to reinvest back into my business. And I like to see the business grow. And then as it grows, then you can allocate some funds to certain things. But let's get into how to get leads. And this is not the first and the most important one I would do. So to overemphasize this point, don't misunderstand what I'm saying. We don't teach this in the Senior Placement Institute because this is not number one. But based on what the article has brought out is paid ads. Now, it's talking about mainly, I think in the article, Brittany, about communities, I
Correct.
believe. So, but I want to take it to the point of senior placement agents as well. There's plenty of ones that have done paid ads, done really well. Some of my stories. I've done some paid stuff that had zero return on my investment, but that's okay. You live and learn. But what about paid ads? Should a senior placement agent embark upon paid ads?
My recommendation is no. But from my experience, so yeah, I think this article is definitely talking about communities. I don't know if we can talk about this. I didn't know if this was an angle we could go at it. So if this is how they're recommending to work with communities. So this is a marketing agency, obviously. So I think a way, maybe their point here, like using paid advertising, being empathetic, making sure you have the right, words, using things like caring. I know, there's just so many different keywords and things that I know it's the next step, understanding all that stuff. That's not my guru. I know you've hired people. I know people in this industry that have tried that. But here's like a thing out there, if you're a placement agent now, or if you're looking to be a placement agent, you can do a simple Google search and look at some of the paid advertising for memory cares. You can look and see the words they're using, the articles they're using, the blogs they're using. Per this article, it says, the lower end of a memory care lead is about $100 to $120 per lead. I would probably agree with that from my experience. And then converting those leads is another story. So yeah, it's a tough market. It's very competitive. when it comes to paid advertising. But if you are a placement agent and you're great at SEO and all these things that I'm not great at, yeah, you can definitely take a check into it. But
it kind of leads into the other one you mentioned. I think
yeah.
SEO. I think that's what you mentioned, as far as like websites is concerned. And I just had a conversation with Josh about this. You know, if you don't know, he's my son. I know you know him, but you just met him a few weeks ago. But some people out there in our audience that may not know, he's my son. He started working with us back in March of this year. He's in the military for 8 years, and we went over SEO, and that's something I haven't been real good at. I've kind of tried a few things, but man, it's very difficult. But you need to have a website, and if you're a senior placement agent, and make sure that your website is optimized as best you know how. I would encourage, this is kind of off the record because this has nothing to do with the article, but since we're talking about websites, don't have a whole lot, if any, I don't like those things. I can recognize a photo from Canva with my eyes closed, I believe, Brittany, because I see them so much, and people think that's just the way to go. And it's really not. Be more personable on your website. Be more personable in your advertising, whether it be on Google, whether it be on Facebook or any other social media that you decide to go on. But be personable. Make yourself stand out, stand apart. So, I like getting into this one now. Websites, and again, we're talking about communities in this article, but how's it relate to senior placement agents? I love number 3. I love me some number 3. Some sniffs. Just probably what you sneeze or you cough. I don't know.
Oh, sorry. I'm muted.
That was a perfect timing. I thought you may have sneezed. I was like, we're talking about sniffs, getting you to sneeze.
No, I cough. Yeah.
Yeah. So skilled nursing facilities, the long game, the hard game, difficult road. I've heard it all, man. Man, this doesn't work. They never call me back. I love it, man. I love the more talk I hear about that, the more I love, because that just reminds me of probably what my competition is going through. They're just going, oh, it's too difficult. I can't do it. Good, quit. Good, quit. Because I'll go right. I love it. Quit. But skilled nursing facilities, I love talking to social workers. When you can get to her, I say her because in my area, guys, there's only one male social worker that I know of. So if I ever say, use the word, she, her, and that kind of thing for social workers, don't mean anything by it. That's who I deal with, right, primarily. But I love skilled nursing facilities. Hospitals is another one. Discharge planners. We'll get into about 3 more here, but hospitals can be difficult. Here's a pro tip. Can I give a pro tip, Brittany, on hospitals?
Yeah.
All right, pro tip on hospitals. If you decide to go into hospitals and try to talk to discharge planners, case managers, and you find it very difficult to get to them, or you feel like there's no results whatsoever. And it's one thing we'll tell our students. So I'll tell you guys out there, again, here's a pro tip. Don't go during the week. Monday through Friday, stay away from them. Take a little of your personal time and go on the weekend. Hospitals will have typically a weekday staff and a weekend staff. If you go on the weekend, my opinion, Brittany, and I've said this a lot, and don't be offended out there if you're some of my friends watching this as far as a senior placement agent, but most of you guys are lazy. I tell you, I just think most of them are. I don't think it's the industry because they're lazy. I think it's because of the amount of money they make. And when you have a really good week, I think it's tempting for anyone. When you make $15,000, you just say you had 3 move-ins, all keep the math easy, $5,000 each. You made 15 G's this week. And it's just like, I think I'll just relax a little bit. I deserve a break. And so it's easy for that. But go on the weekend. That would be a good one. Brittany, what about ERs? I can't say I've ever done any advertisement or gone to ERs and talked to anyone there. Have you ever done that or heard anyone doing that?
Yeah, I have. I haven't personally walked into ERs. I know some people do. I've been fortunate where I've been able to get into ERs through the hospital social workers that kind of pass my information around. Like I know I said earlier that I even had a hospital ask me if I could have somebody on site in the ER 24/7.
Wow.
And I was like, wow.
That is incredible.
And
say
the
that
reason
again. They would like for you to have somebody on site 24 hours a day to provide information.
And the reasoning was so many seniors are seeing a huge increase in seniors coming in or their families bringing them in, specifically with dementia and Alzheimer's, and they're sundowning or they've had, they've got aggressive or combative, and the family just has no idea what to do. So they bring them to the ER, and yes, they can admit them or try to admit them, right? But there's only so much they can do for dementia or Alzheimer's. They can check to see if there's something underlying medical going on, UTI, dehydration. But they're beyond that, if it's something where they're just progressing in their disease, the ER and the hospital can't do much for these seniors, unfortunately. So the families are looking at the ER like, well, what do we do? We can't take them home. I have no support. What are we going to do? That's really, so that was their purpose by saying that, is that we can try to find a way to admit them, but there's only so much we can admit them on. If there's nothing medically going on, we're at a loss. And then unfortunately, the end of that, being a senior placement or agent, a lot of times our clients go to the hospital, then they go to rehab. Well, there's a 9 out of 10 times people with dementia and Alzheimer's are walking the halls. So they have no reason to even try to get them to go to rehab. So I know that we always talk about this too in this industry, is there should be a discharge plan the second they walk into an ER or the second they walk into a skilled. Well, it's all question marks if there's, no plan in the future. So that's why they made that comment.
Wow, that is fantastic, guys. I have been doing this business since 2018, and I have never heard of that. That is amazing. That's the kind of things that you can learn in the Senior Placement Institute, right, Brittany? It's just the collaboration with students, because we got weekly coaching, monthly workshops, things like that. You stay informed. It's not really a course, kind of this side note here about the Senior Placement Institute, because sometimes it gets thrown into just like an online course, and it is. But guys, it's not just that. It's actually you're buying into a community. We charge one fee only. And you can go ahead and schedule a time with us, seniorhomebusiness.com/call. You can do that, and we can talk all about this. But these are some things that you'll learn. I mean, shoot, I'm the founder and president of the company, and I didn't even know this tactic. I mean, Brittany, you're shining some light on. I'm kind of in my head, kind of going through some. Man, I might want to explore this. I never knew that. That's pretty cool. How about home care agencies?
Definitely. So a lot of times there's seniors that have I call it maxed out the resources with home care a couple different ways. Price point is usually the big thing. 24-hour in-home care oversight is going to be a roughly $20,000 to $30,000 a month, probably nationwide. That's going that way. Another thing, as far as dementia and memory care goes and Alzheimer's, the thing about it is if you have a caregiver in a home and a senior's trying to elope, there's only so much a caregiver can do. It's hard you can't really restrain them physically, because someone with dementia or Alzheimer's will become aggressive like they should if somebody was handling them that way. There's only so much you can do from a fire marshal standpoint to secure them. So many times if a senior's eloping, home care does not make sense. They need to be in a memory care with a secured environment. So a lot of leads can come from home care agencies. Wow.
Okay. And last but not least, fire department. I've actually had some encounters with some fire departments over the years. I wouldn't say more recently, but it is a great opportunity to connect with working professionals that encounter situations like this on an ongoing basis. Have you had any experience with fire departments?
I do. There's actually a program. I would check your counties if you're a placement agent or trying to get started. There's actually a program in my county that it's kind of a frequent flyer program, they call it. So, and a lot of this does pertain to memory care. I would say it's probably the number one reason they get calls, falls, constant lift assist, these things where they're getting seniors. Usually, almost always, it's a spousal situation. The wife is calling for the husband is calling for wife, vice versa, but they're dialing 911 often. There's a program where if they continue to dial 911, the fire department and paramedics show up. They have to give them resources. They even have a social worker that helps them try to come up with a solution, because their resources as a fire department, cannot keep going out to these homes for these things. So they're actually required to give them some information after so many calls. And they also started charging, unfortunately, the families for lift assist. So I know your first 2 are free, but now after that, it's $250 if they have to come help you off the ground.
Wow. You guys, in closing real quick, I want to talk a little bit about quality memory care leads going into quality memory care communities. So as a senior placement agent, it's our responsibility and job to make sure that the residents are well taken care of. And again, if you don't know anything about this industry, or maybe you just have a loved one that you are possibly looking into memory care, you want to make sure that you do your due diligence, do your research on the communities. They're not all the same. There's some really 5-star communities out there, and there's some 3 stars. And so you can all kind of equate to going to restaurants and hotels. And I know this is much more severe situation than hotels and restaurants, but the quality of service that you'll get, the level of service you get, think of that in terms of care, your loved one going to these communities. So always look for quality memory care leads. I mean, as you're going out in terms of, and when I say quality memory care leads, Brittany, I'm thinking like senior placement agents. Never go on a tour. It's another pro tip if you don't know. I know you know, Brittany, but the audience is don't go on a tour with someone that cannot go to that community. They cannot afford that community. There's no way they could actually get into that community. It's not the looky-loos, kicking the tires, checking it out, those type things. You want to bring that information to the families. You can bring that via in person, online, but you want to bring that information, but always bring a qualified and quality memory care lead to a quality memory care community. So, Brittany, give me a closing remark on all of this. Wrap it up with a bow. Let's send everybody off.
Yeah, just to piggyback off that really quick too, not only financially, but make sure they can qualify medically for that memory care. So we teach that in the Senior Placement Institute. If you are a placement agent out there, make sure that you understand what levels of care the memory cares can accept. Especially memory care. I think the main thing that will stick out is someone, unfortunately, that needs a little more love. If they're aggressive or combative, you will run into that. There's no doubt being a senior placement agent. So make sure you do your research, make sure you know your community so you're pointing your families in the right direction. But memory care, it's a tough one. It's a very rewarding placement. Make sure you use your empathetic side of you and really help these families out. It will, again, be the hardest, but the most rewarding. And to kind of tie it up to make sure memory care, when it comes to qualifying those communities and how we teach our students how to do that, make sure they have good care. Memory care will be the hardest and the toughest placement, but also when you get feedback, it could be the worst feedback that you have out of all the different levels of care that senior living has. So just be careful, do your due diligence, and help these families.
Absolutely, guys. Till next time, God bless.